Hello, everyone. It's Patty, and I'd like to go over some things with everyone from kind of I don't know, maybe a scientific perspective of how the immune system works and a little bit of truth about why, we are being lied to about what's going on with regards to the fear that is basically destroying so many people's livelihoods. And people are upset, they're crying, they're losing their jobs. So that's what I'm going to do with you today. I'm going to talk about that. Okay, I was reviewing a scientific article about this virus that seems to be somewhat unique compared to other viruses. And I will point out that, I'm not 100% sure of the pathogenesis of any virus. In fact, I am very much open to alternative ways of seeing how our body protects itself. And there is the pleomorphism theory, which kind of goes straight in the face of the currently accepted germ theory, which Louis Pasteur was the proponent of the germ theory. The germ theory is, quite a nice theory if you're a pharmaceutical company, because if you can come up with a germ and you can provide a drug to kill said germ, then you're going to make a lot of money. But even with that said, many of these antibiotics, especially the antibiotics more so than the antiviral medications, those aren't really working that well, mostly because they come with so many side effects. I mean, people, they develop psychosis, they develop a lot of GI issues. It's just these drugs are not the healthiest drugs to fight something that in reality, if you turn to nature, you can fight it quite easily. Okay, so that's the germ theory. Pleomorphism is a theory that is related to Béchamp, and I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, but it comes down to the culturing medium, that our body, based on the health of its interstitial spaces. And what are those interstitial spaces? We'll see this image right here. We see cells, those cute little purple cells, and we see blood vessels, and we see lymphatic vessels. And my mentor, Dr. Robert Morse, commonly says that our body is just basically a bunch of cells with two major fluids. And these are the two major fluids, blood and lymph. And it's the health of these interstitial spaces that really determines how your body is working and how free it is to do what it is that you want to do. So I'm a big proponent of health. I think that if you have health, you have everything. Unfortunately, we live in a society where there are many psychopaths trying to control us. And these psychopaths, they are shutting down people's freedoms by locking down our economy due to the germ theory, where we're all afraid of a little virus. And I honestly, again, I'm not questioning the validity that, people are getting sick. I don't think we have all of the answers, nor do I think that they're being 100% upfront with us about what's really going on. But, these illnesses, I think they come on yearly because, in the wintertime, it's not uncommon for people to get sick because it's cold and we see more of a lockdown in our interstitial spaces. What do I mean by that? Well, when it's cold, we tend to stay inside more, and we're not moving our body as much, and we're not getting as much sun. The sun is vitally important. So those countries that are making it unlawful for people to go out in the sun, they're actually physically harming their citizens because we need the sun. I'll show you a picture here. The sun, when it hits our skin, it elicits the first step, or I should say it triggers the first step in a 3-step reaction that leads to the production of vitamin D. And vitamin D is so incredibly important. When I teach about the importance of vitamin D to my students at the college I teach at, I primarily focus on its role in calcium absorption. However, Vitamin D is needed for a lot of immune activities. There's a correlation between various diseases, and I say diseases in quotes because I don't really work with diseases as a naturopath. As someone who teaches in the allopathic field, I can use diseases in their terminology because certain diseases that allopathy has, come up with, which is basically a collective of symptoms that they decide, this collective of symptoms will be named this disease. So certain of those diseases are more prevalent in people that have vitamin D deficiencies. And I would say that they're more prevalent in people that are not getting outside and doing what humans should be doing, enjoying nature. So we need vitamin D. We need really all of our vitamins and minerals. They play just an enormous role in human health. And a lot of it comes from nature, okay? I'm not a big fan of supplementation, using isolates. I think we can get what we need from plants, from clean water, and from, strong, loving relationships and proper sleep. The foundations of what is called natural hygiene, which is the proper way to live so that you don't have to suffer. And if you don't know what natural hygiene is, look into it. There's a lot of resources out there, but that's really what I first stepped into when I was in allopathic medical school years and years ago, and I decided that I didn't want anything to do with that system. So with that said, it comes down to what we're looking at here in this image. So we are made up of, every single organ in our body is made up of cells and two major fluids, okay? And if these interstitial spaces, which are the spaces between the cells, if they become congested, if they trap waste products, if we're not letting the flow of the fluids continue with in a way in which we can release those waste products, then we're going to attract things that will try to get rid of the waste products for us. And that's where the pathogens really come in. And I don't even like to call them pathogens. I define a pathogen in my human anatomy and physiology course as a disease-causing agent. But in reality, I think these little subcellular structures, or maybe they're microcellular structures, whatever they are, I think they're there to help us. I think everything is there to help us. And what we've been lied about, and this is the big lie, is we have been told that we need to fear nature. We have been told that everything is out there to get us. And if you just take a shift in your perception and you realize that everything is there to help us, and we look at this pleomorphic theory of health, these little critters that show up in our body, they're not there because they're trying to do mean things to us. They're there to help us. And they're there to break down those wastes that are building up in these interstitial spaces. Okay, so what we need to have happen, and let's start with the blood. Dr. Morse describes our blood as the kitchen. And so the blood will release oxygen to the cells. It will release nutrients like glucose, amino acids to the cells. And those nutrients are picked up by the cells. And the cells, being metabolic entities, they produce waste products. A lot of the waste products that are produced are acidic. Now, some of those are picked up by the blood, like carbon dioxide is picked up by the blood. Lactic acid, creatinine can be picked up by the blood. But a lot of the congestive waste products, those are picked up by the lymph. All right? So the lymph will carry that away. And if the lymph doesn't carry those thicker, congestive waste products, then we have some issues. So the problem comes with what causes a backup in this interstitial area. What will cause that? Well, a lot of it has to do with diet. A lot of it has to do with lifestyle. Certain large proteins that we don't break down quite easily because these are molecules that we are not evolutionarily designed to consume, like milk products and proteins from animal sources. These things, they get trapped in these interstitial spaces, or they just don't get absorbed completely, and they become what we call antigenic. And we do have immune cells, and we do have these immune cells, which we're going to look at here in just a second. Okay, so before we get to the immune cells here, there's another look at the lymphatic vessels and the blood capillaries. So these are our two major fluids. Our blood is a circuit, and our lymphatic capillaries, they carry the excess waste products away. So leaving the blood, we always have more fluid leaving the blood than goes back into the blood. So it is true that the blood is really just the kitchen. It's delivering the nutrients. Like I said, it picks up a few things, but primarily it's a deliverer. Look at the arrows here. And the wastes are being picked up by the lymph. And the lymphatic system is, it doesn't really have a pump like the cardiovascular system does. So the lymphatic system is really dependent on our body moving to get that lymph flowing, to get it to be moving in the direction to where these waste products will be ultimately leaving our body. And all intracellular waste products leave through the kidneys, okay? Because our kidneys, they release those waste products as urine out of the body. So here we see a close-up of a lymphatic capillary, and they have these overlapping endothelial cells which can open up and let large substances in. Large proteins, large congestive mucus types of molecules, they enter the lymph, carried away from those interstitial spaces. Again, if they get stuck in the interstitial spaces, clinically that's referred to as edema, and edema traps things. And then the more that's trapped in those interstitial spaces, the more irritated that tissue becomes, and then irritation leads to inflammation. And that's one thing we want to focus on here, because one of the articles I'm reading about this little virus is that a lot of the clinical signs in the patients are showing that they have an overreactive immune response in trying to deal with this interstitial congestion. And they're actually giving these people immunosuppressive drugs, believe it or not. They're giving somebody who has an infection immunosuppressive drugs. Does that sound like a good idea? Do we want to suppress our immune system when we need it the most? Well, modern medicine believes we do. So I'll just kind of continue on with this lecture. This is the allopathic textbook way of talking about the directional flow of lymph. So it begins at our tissues and the blood capillaries, and they're showing that the lymph, the waste products that we're trying to get rid of, go back to the blood. So that's like dumping all of your trash in the middle of your kitchen floor and saying, oh, well, hopefully it'll just get carried away. Maybe we'll deliver it. Maybe we'll eat this trash for dinner. Again, these waste products are going to be excreted out through the kidneys. I have a whole other video that shows the connection. Well, it doesn't really truly show it because it's never been thoroughly studied as it should be. But I do have a video that does show a possibility of that connection of the lymph draining in the kidneys directly. All right, so I want to jump ahead to the immune system. And by the way, here's pretty severe edema. This woman would have what is called pitting edema, where if you were to press her tissue, like the fingerprint would stay there. That's a lot of congestion in those interstitial spaces. And that's just trapping anything that comes by, okay? Now, this is a severe example, but many people have levels of this that might not be this severe, but it's definitely trapping something. And that's what you need to worry about when we deal with these little pathogens, because really what the pathogen is, it's you trapping something that your body can't clear out. And then you develop symptoms, which is your body's attempt to try to clear that out. And that's where, for a respiratory type of pathogen, and I'm putting pathogens here in, again, quotes, because again, I don't think anything is there to harm us. It's all working with us. But you need to release it, okay? So yeah, a lot of these pathogens are going to be eliminated through the urine, but some, especially those in the respiratory tract, they can be eliminated through exhalation, through breathing. We even cough and spit up mucus, so that's another way to relieve the congestion in the body. All right, so I'm moving on. This is just the lecture I show my students. This is a lymph node, by the way. The lymph nodes do contain immune cells, and the lymphatic vessels do pass through the lymph nodes. And this is where our immune cells can make note of anything that could be somewhat needing clearing of. And this is where we can take the time to help to clear that out. Okay, our body is amazing. We have T cells and B cells. These are two different types of lymphocytes. And here's one thing I want to talk a little bit about with regards to the C word. You know, in a lot of cases where somebody develops a cancer, they will remove lymph nodes because they find evidence of the cancer cells, quote unquote, cancer cells in the lymph node. Well, guess what? That's where they need to go so our immune cells can see them and attack them. We have T lymphocytes called cytotoxic T lymphocytes, and their main job is to destroy cancer cells. So if the cancer cell can't pass within this lymph node, it's not going to be recognized as an abnormal cell, and it's not going to be destroyed. So what do they do in cancer? They remove these normal organs, and each lymph node is an organ. They're removing organs when you have cancer, which substantially diminishes your ability to fight off the cancer. Here's another look at a lymph node. And here are some areas in the body where lymph nodes tend to be a little bit more concentrated. Let's see. I'm just going to get to the immune cells here. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Tonsils are another thing they routinely remove. Again, immune cells, the T and B lymphocytes, macrophages, they're all there, ready to attack anything that's foreign. But, they remove tonsils quite often when they swell up too much. Well, the reason why they're swelling up is because there's too much congestion there. And they're responding to the excess interstitial stagnation. So if you just get rid of that interstitial stagnation, if you clear that out, then you won't have the swollen tonsils and everything will be fine, and your tonsils will be there to do what they need to do, to drain the various tissues in your body and to protect you. But when you remove that, you're removing that layer of protection. Do you see kind of a theme here? They want to diminish our body's ability to protect itself. And these psychopaths like Bill Gates, they want to inject your body with poison so that your immune system will overreact all of the time. And that's another thing I'm going to talk about, because I think it's in the vaccinated people we're seeing this pathogen, quote unquote pathogen, we're seeing this really disease set of symptoms, collective of symptoms, being more prevalent. Okay, so let's jump ahead. So here's our immune system. Again, to my students, I define a pathogen as a disease-causing agent. Again, all of these pathogens are there to help us. Whether it's a virus, a bacteria, it's there to eat away the interstitial stagnation. It's kind of like a little roto-rooter, It goes in there and it gobbles up the junk because it shouldn't be there, and we need something to clear it out. If our body can't do that, and, evolutionarily, again, we have done that easily because we are meant to move. Our bodies are not meant to be sitting in cubicles for, 40 hours a week and eating junk food. We're meant to be outdoors in the sun, moving our body. That's part of the pillar. That's one of the pillars of health with regards to natural hygiene. You need to be moving. You need to be in the sun. You need to be eating a species-appropriate diet. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds. These are the things, and heavy on the fruit, by the way, and the vegetables, because they are water-rich. Coming back to our immune cells, we have different types of immunity. We have what is called innate immunity. I'll just go back here again. The innate defenses, that's what we're born with. Our skin is a good example. As long as your skin isn't cut open, you're not going to have any dangerous things that might harm you enter your body. And then the adaptive defenses, this is really what our immune system is. So when I teach the immune system to my students, because, again, I'm teaching for pre-allopathic health students. These are future doctors, future nurses. And, they abide by and their funding for their schools come from big pharma. And, the way that they make money is by selling drugs. And a lot of doctors, by the way, and this is part of the reason why I left medicine, because, these individuals that are drug pushers from pharmaceutical companies, they go into the doctor's office and they're pushing their drug and they're giving the doctors incentives for prescribing more of their drug. And they're educating the doctors on these drugs. And then the doctors, because they're so busy, they're really busy, they don't have a time to research every single drug, and they start prescribing it. And that's kind of where that's when I realized, I'm like, this is just it wasn't something that I could align with. It really wasn't. All right, so let's talk a little bit about fever and inflammation or other types of innate defenses. They, with inflammation, going back for just a second, it's a good thing. Inflammation is part of our body's response against something that shouldn't be in our tissue spaces. You see redness, swelling, heat, and pain. Those are the 4 cardinal signs of inflammation. What do doctors do? They look at a tissue that has these signs. They name the organ that's suffering with these signs, the redness, swelling, heat, and pain. They put itis at the end of that organ, like if this is occurring in the larynx, which is the voice box, they call it laryngitis. And then they give you drugs to suppress these symptoms, which are, again, your body's way of trying to eliminate it on its own. But when you suppress it, you push it deeper into those interstitial spaces, and that's when those tissues become more chronically diseased and more likely to attract other pathogens. Do you see what's going on here? All right. Fever is the same thing. It's an innate defense. It's basically our body's resetting its temperature to help eliminate, well, the way we describe it is it inhibits pathogen reproduction, but really what it does is it speeds up healing. When you elevate your body's temperature, things move faster, right? And you can speed up elimination more easily. So that's why fevers are good. Don't ever suppress a fever. Let it run its course, because if you have a fever and you just let it go, it's going to speed up your healing. But if you suppress it, you're going to be sicker for a longer period of time. All right? So our immune system is also called the adaptive defenses. There are 2 main branches, cell-mediated and antibody-mediated. And a lot of our immune cells deal with what are called pathogens. And pathogens have little proteins on their surface that are antigenic, an antigen is something that can stimulate an immune response. So we have cell-mediated immunity and antibody-mediated immunity. With cell-mediated, this primarily involves what are called the cytotoxic T cells. These cells will kill virally infected cells and cancer cells. So basically, what is a virally infected cell? It's a cell that's expressing an abnormal antigen or an abnormal protein. Where might abnormal proteins come from? I wonder if they come from foods that have been denatured, like cooked meat, because we eat a lot of that in this country, don't we? Flame broiled meat on the grill. You're denaturing the heck out of those proteins, and then they come into our body. They're all weird looking, and then they become incorporated into our cells. And then our cytotoxic T cells will try to kill them because they shouldn't be there. And then cancer cells are the same thing. They're abnormal, right? And then with antibody-mediated immunity, this is where the B cells are involved, the B lymphocytes. They become stimulated and they start producing antibodies. So antibodies are just like these little red flags that attach to anything that looks abnormal, so that then they can be tagged for phagocytosis or destruction by another cell. So with these types of immune responses, let me just kind of jump ahead here. So here we're looking at the activation of cytotoxic T cells. There are many cytokines and other chemicals that are released in this activation process. And here we can see with cytotoxic T cells, they play a role in cell-mediated immunity. And during this activation process, cytokines are released. And they help to make a stronger immune response because they're activating more cells. And there's going to be some inflammation because it's kind of like anytime there's a war, there's always going to be collateral damage. So you really will only want to activate this when our body really needs to. So I want to really stress this, and I try to stress this to my students, even though I can't be forthright about it, I try to stress to them how you don't want to activate cytotoxic T cells unless you really need to. Because you're pulling out the big guns in your immune system. You're killing things that are abnormal. So the first thing is to not take anything in abnormal and to try not to live an abnormal life. That would be the best thing to do. However, we don't live a normal life. Nothing about what we're doing right now is normal. Everything is abnormal. Our diet, our lifestyle, the stress people are feeling, and now we're adding more stress to people's lives by, keeping them indoors, and people are getting frustrated with each other, and, people are fighting, and there's just a lot of stress right now. I mean, I feel it. Probably not as much as most people because I, live with dogs and my cat, and I try to keep things pretty stress-free as much as possible. But anyway, they're noting in these people with this pandemic virus that they have a cytokine storm. So they're releasing a lot of the chemical mediators that are activating this type of mechanism in our bodies. And typically a healthy body would only do this when necessary, but there are things that can elicit this. And this is what I found to be really interesting about some of the research articles I'm reading and other things I've heard listening to other physicians and scientists who are looking at this pandemic virus more closely, is that, this cytokine storm, really the only way to kind of suppress it is to give people immunosuppressive drugs, and that is helping to alleviate their symptoms. And that's not probably the best way. I mean, immunosuppressive drugs are given to people that are, needing a transplanted organ. This is something we don't want to suppress. We don't want to suppress anything in our body. We want our body to work naturally, but they're taking in these immunosuppressive drugs. And here's the thing that I found really interesting, is that vaccines do the same damn thing. A vaccine, which is a poison injected into your bodily fluids, again, it will elicit these types of reactions. Both the cell-mediated immunity, which we're seeing right here, and also the antibody-mediated immunity, which I'll jump ahead and we'll look at that one. Okay, I pulled up a more updated lecture that I was using my old lecture for this, but here you can see some of the cytokines involved in eliciting these various reactions. This is part of what's involved in what is called antibody-mediated immunity. So, we ingest a foreign protein or quote-unquote pathogen, and that's done by an antigen-presenting cell like the macrophage. It will express that processed protein antigen through what is called an MHC class II molecule, and that will stimulate the helper T cell, which then releases cytokines. There's our cytokines that will activate our B lymphocyte to become a antibody-producing plasma cell. And then these antibodies, they are, like I said, they go out and they will tag various pathogens or various things that are foreign that need to be eliminated. So here we see that stimulation process, and then here we have the antibodies that are produced. And it's kind of funny, I saw one thing about how these quote-unquote scientists that, I don't know what kind of scientists they are, but they're claiming that, if you have antibodies against this pandemic virus, and I call it a pandemic virus because it's a very unnatural thing from what I can tell. This pathogenesis is not behaving like anything else I've seen. But they're saying that antibodies won't protect people. Yet, at the same time, they want to push a vaccine, and the whole purpose of the vaccine is to lead to the production of antibodies. So they're kind of, putting their foot in their mouth when they say nonsense like that. Anyway, antibodies, also called immunoglobulins, this is kind of what they look like. They bind to things that are foreign, and there are different types of antibodies. And, we're talking about proteins here. That's what an antigen is, foreign proteins. So, anyway, this is what the antibodies do. Again, they can trigger through what we call their constant region, a mast cell or basophil, to release inflammatory chemicals. And you commonly see this in allergic type reactions. They can also facilitate phagocytosis, where we engulf foreign protein or foreign antigen. So, anyway, that's a little bit about what I wanted to share with you all, because I keep seeing this stuff and none of it makes sense, honestly. And I think that the really important take home from all of this is that we need a shift in perception, and we need to demand that we have a different explanation, because this control, as Dr. Shiva, who I've been listening to, he talks about this top-down control that we have, this authoritarian control system in the United States government especially. It's just there to suppress us all. It's just there to basically steal from us. And, they're not our public servants. They're tyrants. I think that this top-down control is going to be something that is saving us. But we need to question all of that, because the only thing that will save us is us. Each of us we're responsible for our own health. We're responsible for our own happiness. And if they take that away from us, then we become slaves. We become little drones that just will obediently work for this satanic, evil system, have our money stolen from us, used for nefarious types of activities, while we just fall in line and do exactly what they say. We are being lied to. This is not a natural expression of anything pathogenic that I've ever seen before. Not that I'm working in the front lines, because again, I don't deal with this system. I walked away from it. I have nothing to do with it. I do help people if they need my help, but I'm not going to recommend anything that's chemical in nature. What I would recommend is, again, returning to nature. Returning to nature. Nature is truth. Natural law is truth. And we need to abide by that. We need to abide by the tenets that promote health, proper diet, proper sleep, being outside, physically active, and good relationships. All of these things are important to keep a human being healthy. And then, with all of that in place, humans can then do what humans need to do. And that is to be creative, to be imaginative. We need to use our imagination to see a world that could be better, to see a potential in something. They're trying to suppress the hell out of us in not having any more imagination. I mean, that's what they do, K through 12, these public indoctrination camps, which we call education. They try to pull that out of these young minds so that they can't think for themselves. And I know it. I mean, I have students that really cannot do simple, logical types of analysis. They want to be spoon-fed. And that's because they've been trained to be spoon-fed. They just want, they teach teachers to tell their students just to kind of be these regurgitating Autobots that are just going to read and then just regurgitate it on the exam. I don't want that. I want my students to think for themselves. I want them to look at something, question it, and ask themselves, is this natural? Is this good? Because we're not doing that right now. We are not questioning what the hell is going on in this society. And by not questioning it, we're letting our freedoms just be taken away from us. And we're going to become slaves in this system. Well, we already are slaves, but we're going to be further tortured and indentured slaves. We really need to step up and say no to this evil system. We should have choices in our healthcare. We should be able to leave our damn houses, for the love of God. I mean, even the numbers of this, maybe certain areas of the United States are a little bit more hard hit, but the entire country on lockdown, I think that's overriding the authoritarian top-down reach of these psychopaths that are in control. All right, so I'm going to end this here. I just wanted to share this with you. I haven't made a video in a while because I will tell you that I have been working probably close to 80 hours a week on the college course I'm teaching because I had to switch the 6 preps that I was doing to online learning, to an online format. I'm teaching 3 different lectures and 3 different labs, and that's all I'm doing is creating online content. But I wanted to take today to share this information with you because it's always on my mind. I just don't have a platform really. And I'm using BitChute, which is a new platform for content because I don't trust YouTube. I don't trust Google. I don't trust any of those. Google and YouTube and Facebook, they're all part of the system. So we need to stop feeding that system first and foremost. Maybe in the interim we can use those platforms just to get people more aware, to waken them up. But something needs to change here, folks. So anyway, that's all I'm going to share with you. Have a wonderful day. Stay hopeful, and don't lose your imagination. Try to, in your mind, visualize that which is possible for humanity, because I sure as hell don't want to live like this, and I'm sure many other people don't.